All right, I'm here with Jeff Jarvis now and talking about his new book, which is all about sharing. And Jeff wrote a whole chapter about Germany and about the Germans being scared of sharing. So, Jeff, maybe let's talk about what it's all about.
Germany is a fascinating laboratory to look at privacy because the Germans have gone to rather more lengths than anyone else on things like Street View and Google Buzz and Facebook and so on. Street View, of course, you have the Verpixelungsrecht of people demanding the right to be pixelated there. Much stress about Buzz and Facebook. And so I try to understand kind of why that is and also look at it in terms of trying to understand concern about privacy and technology. So I'm not suggesting the Germans are scared of sharing everything, but privacy here is a much bigger issue than it is in other countries.
Why is that?
I'm not sure why. Some argue that it's the recent political history, but I don't buy that because my Schwieger Oma and Schwieger Opa came from Germany in 1923, and they were very private people. My wife's Opa would say, you mustn't tell people that, no one needs to know that. And Germans I talk to say that, yes, that's part of the German culture, is a high sense of privacy. The joke in the book, and it's just a joke, is that I then went to my first German sauna, which of course is nackt und gemischt, and to an American, that's shocking. And the cheap punchline to this is that the Germans care deeply about the privacy of everything except their private parts. And yes, it's a joke, and please don't be offended, but there's also a lesson to be learned there. And there's a question that it raises. Why is the private private and why is the public public? Why are Americans so ridiculous and puritanical about our bodies? I think the Germans have a more mature attitude about that. There are cultural things that go into this. But the internet cuts across cultural lines. The internet becomes international. I spoke with some editors at Die Zeit while I was writing the book and talked about privacy. And one of them said, okay, yeah, we're pretty strict about privacy. But he said, my daughters aren't that way. My daughters live on an internet culture. So does the internet culture perhaps start to supersede our national cultures? This is a very interesting question, and I think Germany is the best country to use as an illustration of that and to look at that.
Okay, and what do we miss out with being scared of sharing?
Well, let's first be clear that there are a lot of Germans on Facebook, and StudiVZ before that, and so on. So there is sharing that occurs here. Germans not so much on blogs and Twitter, which is I find kind of interesting. But I think there's something beyond just sharing your life and sharing the things that interest you and so on. When you do that, benefits come to you. You meet people, you make relationships with people. As companies, you have the chance to collaborate with people because you know what their interests are. And sharing, I think, yields trust and all kinds of important things. But there's a bigger issue, I think, for Germany to look at, is that sharing is also just about being public. And we in America are public to a fault, you could say. But if you look at, for example, Silicon Valley and startups, we take some pride even in failing publicly. And my German friends say, not so much here in Germany. And so I think that's a question as to whether, in at least a business sense, is the German cultural view of operating in public going to end up in some conflict with an entrepreneurial technology-based economy? Those are interesting questions that I think that I can't answer, but I'd be interested to watch Germans ask and answer that.
What is the best story you've heard, the best thing what came out of sharing? We read about your cancer story and so on, but maybe a new story you've heard since you published your book.
I think the best stories that come are individual stories of someone saying that because I went online and because I expressed this interest, I met someone who cared about the same thing I care about. And I think it's as simple as that. It's not necessarily some big thing. Yes, I talked about my prostate cancer. I talked about my malfunctioning penis. I got people to help me, support me. I got people to get tested. That's all wonderful, but that's an exceptional moment. I think that the real benefit of sharing comes day to day, where you get to meet someone. And so I've met people who, because they've shared, because they've blogged or things like that, they've gotten jobs, they've met their wives or husbands, they've met people around the world and expanded their worldview and viewpoint, and I think that's the real benefit of sharing. It's really about just society and connections.
And when people just say they don't want to share, they just want their privacy, what do you tell them?
They shouldn't share it. I am not suggesting for a second that anyone should be forced out of their shell, their closet, call it what you will. Not at all. I'm not arguing for a moment that privacy is dead. Privacy is very much alive. It's important. It needs protection. It has a lot of protectors. All I'm trying to say is that there's another choice. We have a choice now as a public that before you couldn't really talk to the whole world unless you had a newspaper printing press. Now you have an iPhone and a keyboard, and you can share it with the whole world. And that's a new power. And look what that's yielded. It's yielded. The Arab Spring was a revolution of people, not technology, but technology helped. Occupy Wall Street was able to come together around technology. These tools enable us to create and share with and collaborate with publics. And I think that's a really important thing. When I came to Germany for DLD, I came early so I could go to Mainz and go on a pilgrimage to the Gutenberg Museum. And I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind is that Gutenberg here in this nation created the greatest tool of publicness until today. And that tool changed the world in huge and incredible ways. And it was important to leave that tool free. And I think the same is true of the internet. And so when I hear regulators here talk about trying to regulate the internet, to turn it into the past, I'm fearful of that. What I want to protect is this tool of publicness that we have because it empowers the public. No one has to come out and share what they had for breakfast. No one should be forced out of their closet. But if you do, benefits can come, and we can have a new society that I think is more generous and better. And so what I'm trying to do is simply argue the benefits of that, and thus protecting those benefits.
That was Jeff Jarvis talking about his new book, Public Part. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Vielen Dank.